Hey, hi guys. So today our lesson is going to be on why do we actually debit the subsidiaries equity when we're doing the initial pro forma journal entry. So if you look at the initial pro forma journal entry, when we're doing a group accounting, we would actually normally debit the subsidiaries equity. We would credit the investment in the subsidiary. We would credit the non-controlling interest, and then we would either debit a goodwill or we'd obviously credit the gain on a bargain purchase. So why do we actually do this? Why do we debit the equity of the share of the subsidiary? It does not make sense, right? So guys, it's really simple, I promise. Remember, with a subsidiary and with the parent company, when we're actually performing the consolidated financial statements, we take into account the assets of the subsidiary, and we take into account the liability of the subsidiary. So that's very important to understand. And if you go to accounts 101, the basics of accounting, you will learn about the accounting equation. A is equal to O plus L, right? So we know that your assets is equal to your owner's equity plus your liability. Therefore, your equity is actually equal to your net assets, which is equal to your assets less your liabilities. So therefore, if we are preparing the consolidated financial statements and we go and include the assets of the subsidiary, we include the liabilities of the subsidiary, we are in effect including the equity of the subsidiary. By including the assets, we include maybe things like trade receivables, inventory. We don't include directly the equity, share capital, retained earnings, but we include the assets, right? The inventory, the PPE, the non-current assets. We'll go include the liabilities, the trade payables, the non-current liabilities, the loan-bearing, the interest-bearing loans, things like that. That's what we're going to include in the statement of financial position. So although directly we're not including the share capital, the retained earnings, we are including the equity because we're including the net assets. We're including the assets less the liabilities. So if we now go and include the share capital and the retained earnings and whatever other reserves of the share of the subsidiary in our consolidated financial statements, we would then actually be double counting. So therefore, to avoid double counting, we would actually remove the share capital, the retained earnings, and whatever other equity accounts we have of the subsidiary to ensure that these equity accounts, are not included in the consolidated financial statements or the statement of changes in equity, because then we would be double counting, right guys? I really hope that makes sense. So then why do we credit the investment in subsidiary? This might be a bit more easier to understand. When we're looking at the separate financial statements, we would obviously have a one line item for the parent. We would have an investment in subsidiary as an asset. Now we are actually performing the consolidated financial statements. So we are including this investment actually represents the assets and liabilities of the subsidiary, right? So when we perform in the consolidated financial statements, we actually already including the assets and liabilities of the subsidiary. Therefore, if we also include this investment in S as a separate one-liner item, we would again be double counting. So we would actually remove this investment in S, which was recorded as a debit in our separate financial statements. Obviously, the NCI, that's an equity account. Because our equity is increasing, NCI, we have an NCI if we do not have a wholly owned subsidiary. So we would obviously increase the equity, so we would credit NCI. And obviously, if we paid more than what the net asset value, our share of the net asset value is actually worth, we would have goodwill. If we paid less than what our share of the net asset value is worth, we would obviously have a gain on a bargain purchase. So I hope that makes sense, guys. Just remember, don't double count. We're including the assets, we're including the liabilities of the subsidiary. Therefore, we're already including the equity. So we now can't go and include equity again. So we have to actually remove those equity accounts. Hope that makes sense, guys. Take care.